Welcome to the Travel Worth Living podcast. Our mission is to help aspiring travel content creators make a positive impact with the stories they tell. We do this by sharing the how and why of content creation through practical and inspirational stories.
Hey, what's up everybody? It is Seth here. On this week's episode, we dive into the why of travel content creation with Michelle Bird, an artist living in the small town of Borgarnes. Originally from California, she wanted to explore the world to see how other cultures, for lack of a better term, did life. She started by purchasing a one-way ticket to the Netherlands and hasn't looked back since. During our conversation, she also tells several stories from her years in India and how the poverty and culture shock she experienced there made a huge impact on her life. She also shares about her sailing trip to Hornstrandir, a large peninsula in the northwest of Iceland accessible only by hiking or boat or small airplane. She talked about her upcoming sail to Greenland, which was going to be this summer, but unfortunately it had to be postponed until 2022. To learn more about Michelle and the beautiful art house that she runs, you can visit her online at theartofmichellebird.com. Now without further ado, here is our conversation. I'm excited to chat with you today, so welcome to Travel Worth Living, Michelle. So excited to have you on. Yeah, we're here in your art studio, which is amazing. So thanks for letting us come here and set up and record with you here.
Well, thank you, Seth. This is it's fun for me. It's wonderful to meet you and to invite you into my space and to give you a little bit of that creative juice that I'm trying to share. That this house is an art house and there's a lot going on here, a lot of artwork everywhere, but I also have workshops that I host, and these workshops are meant to ignite people's imagination and to help them find a really good space where they can create and do something that they might not normally do, which is painting or drawing, but this is something that they probably did a long time ago and just haven't done.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. So I kind of want to dive into your story. Where are you from? Who are you and why are you here in Borgarnes?
I was born in San Francisco and I was raised in the city. When we were little, we lived in Hawaii as well, in Honolulu. My dad was flying for Japan Airlines and he spoke Japanese, and this helps. And actually, I don't even know if that's true. No, and my grandmother spoke Japanese, but I don't.
Is she do you have Japanese heritage?
No, no, no. My dad's Chinese and Mongolian,
Oh,
but they were in China for the occupation, and that's why. So there are all kinds of reasons you get to learn languages, and
that is true.
yes.
Yeah, that's all. So you're from San Francisco, and yeah, when did you start traveling outside of the U.S.?
Oh goodness. I started traveling in my early 20s, and that was when I had always dreamed of going to Paris. My mom had traveled a lot when she was young, and it was just this great big dream of mine to leave San Francisco and to go somewhere else. And I guess I didn't realize how special Hawaii was when I was a kid, but later on, yeah, it's becoming quite a nice memory for me. However, the first big trip was going from San Francisco to Europe, and I bought a one-way ticket, and I just wanted to go. I wanted to leave. I wanted to live somewhere else. I wanted to. Um, I felt like there must be another way of living, and that life could not just be the daily drudgery of working hard and yeah, never really knowing how secure your existence will be. And in the States, it's tough.
Mhm.
And there aren't things like universal health care, and I had heard of these concepts that that they existed somewhere else, and I thought, wow, there are actually people who care about each other and live together in a more communal way. And I want to find out about this. And so I started traveling, and I actually went straight to the Netherlands because they were um, infamous for their liberal lifestyle and also for all kinds of things like paid education that you could, they have this term in Dutch called the eeuwige student, and that means like the eternal student. And so that meant that there was a time that you could get one master's after the next master's after the next and have it be state funded. They there was also at that time people lobbying for a 4-day work week. It just seemed like a dream. Like, does this place really exist? Is this Shangri-La? And that's kind of what it felt like. And then of course all of their yeah, other, yeah, very peculiar and special lifestyle laws. Let's see, they had, at that time, they were deciding on whether or not they should have bars on their prisons because they really felt that this obstructed view would, yeah, it would impair people's ability to reintegrate with society. And I thought, wow, that's novel. That's, that's really special. That's a new way of looking at things. That's wouldn't fly in the States. but yeah, but I thought that's so cool. I want to live there. And then they had these things like, I think there were even like ambulances, like a special department of ambulances for cats and dogs and pets. And I, God, this is a really well organized society. And then they had, they had very specific gray areas in their laws for soft drugs and hard drugs. But they were thinking about every aspect of how do people live and how are we going to make this very small piece of land work for a lot of people in a lot of different conditions. And I think they've pretty much mastered it. It's a good functioning society.
I think that's interesting that you mentioned the Netherlands because I don't know if you've heard of the book The Island in the Middle of the World. It's about New Amsterdam, which of course turned into New York, and how a lot of the capitalistic mindsets and the free trade that we enjoy in America came from the Dutch. But I feel like we, well, and then of course the English came down and captured the Dutch settlement and turned it into English because the Dutch weren't funding the settlement. It's very interesting history, but it's kind of interesting because we get that a lot and we're kind of stuck back there in that in the 1700s kind of mindset with free trade and capitalism. And I feel like the Dutch that you're talking about, their society today has kind of evolved to think about society more as a whole. So they've gone beyond the good things that they left us in America, and now they're also thinking about reintegration of prisoners, like how can they deal with that, universal health care so we don't all have this huge mental strain. What if something happens? What is going to happen to my income, my family? Being able to be taken care of by society can be very safe and actually make you more productive member of that society.
Indeed, I agree. However, granted, these were my impressions 20 years ago. And so things have changed.
Mhm.
I'm not sure what the situation there is at this moment, but that was a huge motivation for me to travel. Was basically the fact that people um, took these concepts and they created a better world to live in for their communities. And I didn't see that happening in the States. And when I was in the States, it was pretty tough. I saw a lot of people really struggling to make their dreams happen, and the system didn't support it. And that's, I think that was one of the, yeah, my main reasons for wanting to see how other people live. There must be a better way.
Yeah. And 20 years ago, that's kind of before the internet, and a lot of people didn't know about, how things worked internationally. And so tell me a little bit about what you think is the importance of travel as far as kind of getting out of your bubble and understanding the way that different people live and function.
Oh, wow, that's a huge, huge question. There's so many facets to that. Um, Personally, what uh, traveling is not just going from one place to another. It's actually the experience of living in a different way with other people. I'm not really into traveling per se. I like the idea of a long stay. Um,
Not
I
just vacationing for 2 weeks and then leaving.
no, no, I've never done that actually, and we didn't grow up doing that either. So we ended out. We would go somewhere and stay for a while, and this is sort of what I've done all my life. Is I think the shortest vacation I've had is a month, because I really feel like a month is a decent amount of time to get a feeling for a place. But anything less than that, it's not enough time to have an in depth feeling of what's happening, to learn the language. Learning phrases and learning to communicate with people in their own language is a key part of travel. It's a key part of understanding, uh, yeah, what's happening and how people live. Reading signs, understanding what signs mean. It's fun. It's part of the adventure to know that there are reasons for people to have certain beliefs and ideas
Mm-hmm.
that may not be yours, and and traveling has shed a lot of light on issues for me. Um, I was in India, traveling for a year. I left with just a backpack, and I think I had about $3,000 at the time to live for a year. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to see what happens next. And I left with a couple friends, and we started our journey in. We were actually supposed to start in Delhi, but um, our plane landed in Mumbai, and they said, well, we're in Mumbai. We know we're supposed to stop in Delhi, but we just thought we'd stop in Mumbai. If anyone wants to get off, you can get off now. And we kind of looked at each other and we were like, well, we're in India, right? So we got off. And that's sort of how this big adventure, I think one of the most life changing adventures for me began. And so I started with two friends, and we worked our way from Mumbai to Trivandrum. And it was about at that time that we kind of went our own ways. We realized that, yeah, it was tough to fulfill all of our needs. The culture shock was huge,
Mm-hmm.
and coming back after a day of just figuring out how to cross the street was exhausting. Sometimes it took the longest time to figure out when the oxen, when the cars, which way the cars were going, how I was going to dodge through any of this stuff. It was overwhelming, and people everywhere. I had never seen so many people in my entire life. I think when I first arrived, I took maybe one big circle around the hotel, and I came back in and I was just spent. I had never seen so much, heard so much, and everything was different. The sounds were different, the scents were different, the uh, the way people conducted business was different. Yeah, it was such an incredible, important experience for one of my big first travels, in that I couldn't have any expectations. After my first day of arriving there, I just kind of figured, well, I've got a year of this, and I better just make sure that when I go out, that I can figure out how I'm going to get back, because oftentimes everything looked the same. You could walk 2 blocks in one other direction and then just feel like, am I on the same street or am I in a new neighborhood? I would have no idea. And so there were times that I was totally lost in Mumbai. I was walking around, and I thought, oh goodness, I didn't have a phone. This was before that time, and I think the only way I was communicating through to home was through email, and so so there was basically just me and my little notebook and a dictionary where I could hopefully try and translate some things. Fortunately, most people spoke English to some degree, but still in the cheaper parts of Mumbai, that wasn't really the case, and that was sort of the backpacker's destination. Yet there were no other backpackers to be found. So I was feeling a little bit lost for a while, and I remember at that moment when I was lost, and I found myself in this cafe, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to find a cozy cafe, order some food, and just wait. And finally, after some time, I came across another traveler who like helped me find my way back. And that was like one of my first experiences of being in a gigantic city, filled with people and not being prepared. And yeah, yeah, it was a big experience. From after that, so I went to Trivandrum, and then we split ways, and then I came back and I traveled alone from Trivandrum back up to Mumbai, and that became a really tricky situation, because traveling at night for a woman is really not advisable. And I would and the times that buses would leave and arrive could vary, sometimes up to what, 3 to 7 hours. So sometimes people were just waiting forever for the bus or train to arrive, and then here I was thinking, oh no, there is no way that I am going to get to my destination by daybreak. And so then I would have to switch my trip or stay on that bus and to the next destination until I arrived somewhere at daybreak, because it was too tricky to get a taxi, to get a rickshaw. There was no taxi, it was just rickshaws. Yeah. So basically getting a rickshaw at night, and everybody will say, okay, take me, I'm your rickshaw driver, I'll be your rickshaw driver for tonight, I'm going to take you to the best hotel. And it's like, no, 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 but I already have a place. It's like, no, 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 but I have a place for you. And so these kinds of discussions would go on, but to have them alone in the middle of the night was really daunting. And so I avoided that. So I stayed on the buses. I stayed on the buses, I stayed on the trains, and it made travel easier, I think. It was uncomfortable, but the best choice in the end.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, what are since you're talking about that, what are some tips that you've found for especially women who are traveling alone, just for safety?
In general, I felt really well in India. One of the things I didn't do is I did not drink. It's not a drinking culture, and I didn't go to bars or order drinks, and that was really a wise thing to stay away from that. Not that I'm Anywhere else I'll drink.
Yeah.
But not traveling alone. I
Yeah.
think it's really important just to have a clear mind, and also people are watching.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think the most important thing that I learned traveling in India was, especially at that time, was traveling with my own needles. That was something that the GGD in the Netherlands, they recommended this because when I got all of we get these yellow books of your kind of vaccination passport. So when you get your vaccination passport, they also recommend that you take a clean needle, because if not all countries will have a fresh needle for you. And there was a time that I got dysentery when I was in Udaipur, and that's one. I think that's the best thing that I've learned when traveling in rougher environments is listen to your body, find a place to rest as soon as you're tired, because I make bad decisions when I'm tired, and they can be crucial. And one of those decisions was at one point I was walking down the street. There was this beautiful market, and I was exhausted, and someone offered me an orange juice, and I drank it. I was just so exhausted. I took it, and of course the orange juice was watered down with water, and I got dysentery, and I was really out for a long time. It's a tough thing to have. So and that's of course when I had to call in a special medic to my hotel, who came, and I saw him get out a big needle, and it was like, oh God, it's like, wait, wait, I have my own. And it just helped me sleep better.
Yeah. That's a really good point that I actually hadn't thought of. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, because there are all kinds of diseases you can get from a used needle. I always travel now.
Yeah. No, that's a really good tip. So, yeah, you mentioned India was kind of your life-changing trip. What, besides just being in a totally new environment and experiencing new things, what uh what kind of changed in you after that trip?
Um, oh, I think everything changed. I had seen so many unwell people. I had seen women with faces burnt off. I had seen the saddest, most heartbreaking situations in poverty. We actually traveled through Bihar and Calcutta. I went to almost every state in India in this year, and it was it gave me a huge appreciation for systems that work. I could see that people were living with open canalization. They were living in cities like I think was it maybe it was even Udaipur that had places or little villages outside of Udaipur that had um, still open canalization, open sewers, and you know there were rats, and just these infrastructure. I had a great appreciation for infrastructure after that. That wow, these are things that I truly respect.
Yeah.
They make health possible, and having health is a great gift.
It's one of those things that you take for granted until you lose it.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And that was the thing about traveling at that time in India, was that we really I was with my boyfriend. My boyfriend came afterwards at one point and met me for the end part of my trip, and he got a horrible infection. And that's when an infection in his leg, and that's when I realized, ooh, you know, you don't really want to. We went to the hospital, and the doctors were good, but the hospitals were just not they were not up to the same standards in the small villages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was really a point where I felt like I have to go. I really
Yeah.
have to go. I can't live here. It's beautiful. It's enchanting. The people are fantastic, but my gut cannot take this.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those experiences where you're like, okay, I've had enough. I've learned to appreciate these things, and now I can move on.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And but the problem was is India had so many things in the art world that were so attractive to me.
Hmm.
You could it was possible to do bronze casting there, which I did for 3 months in a place called Himachal Pradesh with a family of casters and forgers, and this was such a unique, incredible experience that I would never have been able to afford in any other country and never have experienced in this way. It was almost, yeah, fantastical in some ways because here we were in this small village and we had heard about this famous bronze caster and that he was teaching students, and we had met a few of his students along our path through India up to Himachal Pradesh, and they had made the most wondrous pieces, and we're like, okay, we're going there. And so finally we get to this little village called Chamba, and it was a very difficult journey. We had to take this very long bus ride through heavy mountain terrain, and the bus that arrived right before us actually went off the cliff, and the hospital was filled with patients. And we know that only because when we arrived, we wanted to meet our Guruji, who was teaching bronze casting. He had the night before drunkenly fallen off a balcony and landed in the hospital with all of these patients who were recovering from the bus accident. So yeah, so it was quite an adventure. We arrive at in the hospital. We're searching for this man, and we felt kind of invasive. But his family was like, "No, no, no! Go find him! Go find him! He needs a student." It's like he's got to work. I was like, "Oh gosh!" So we arrive at the hospital, and my boyfriend at the time, he was Dutch, and he had like this blonde, like curly locked hair, uh, and there was there was our teacher. He was lying in his bed and he looked up at us and he's like, "Oh my God, I'm seeing angels. Am I dying?" So, but it was all very dramatic and but quite entertaining and mysterious for us because coming from the Netherlands and after living in the Netherlands for some time, I became very, yeah, what would you call it? In German, there's a great word called vernünftig, like very solid and
Unfazed.
unfazed.
Yeah.
Unfazed is an excellent word. So, so yeah, so there we were. He was in the hospital. And he's like, and we told him why we had arrived, and he's like, "Great, I need students. I can get to work tomorrow." Like, right. He was all bandaged. He looked pretty bad, and so anyway, yeah, we said, okay, well we'll wait for you, and he said, okay, that's fine. There's a little hotel that you can stay at, and so we found ourselves a nice little hotel that would keep us for a couple of weeks until we could find out what we were doing and if we could actually work with him. He got out within a couple of days and we started work and in his studio. So his studio was basically this barren, empty room with nothing in it. That was his studio. And he said, okay, first we begin with what did we have to do? We had to begin with the clay. So we had to make these clay models with beeswax, and it's like, oh God, it must have been about 42 degrees. So you can imagine how tricky it is to make anything like that's going to
Stay
stay.
together.
Stay together. So there we were trying to find the coolest place in this mud house and making these forms, and I was doing replicas of yeah, Indian statues, worship statues, and so anything from Ganeshas to Jain sculptures. So uh, we worked for a couple weeks making these statues, and we specifically then moved to another hotel that had a big enough refrigerator that we could rent because we needed to store our pieces. It was impossible to make anything without being able to put it in the refrigerator every couple of hours. And it was really hard to find refrigeration because that was a luxury in Chamba. Nobody had refrigeration. And even if you went to the butcher, all the meat was just basically outside in this net, enclosed building, just like teeming with flies. So it was tough. It was really tough. And so there we were. We had our sculptures. The next step was so we made our wax figurines, and we had to, after that, envelop them in clay, wire, and jute. So then we spent hours sort of cutting the jute up, mixing the jute up, and pounding our own clay. We had to pound our own clay. So we basically had hard rock that we pounded into like this pulver, this powder that we mixed with water and turned it into clay. And this was all on the floor with just like stones. We had no equipment. And it was hard. The at one point, okay, so that was the second stage. Then we wrapped our wax figurines in this clay form, and we reinforced it with wire and put more clay on it, and baked it. And so then we had our mold. It's just a one-time cast, and that's the beauty of the lost wax method. Is you do it once and that's it, and it's really exciting, the process. But what we didn't realize is like the next step. So then we had to get the metal. Well, there is no metal. Uh, so we had to and he said, well, this is how we get the metal. We send out a couple of boys to go get metal. And it's like, well, they get metal, really? Okay. And they so it's a messing. It's not pure bronze, but it's a messing. Well, they came back. They just like stripped the town of doorknobs, hinges. We came back with like oh Jesus, like ladles, pots, and pans. I'm sure that it was like, we've got to melt this stuff down fast because
Melt the evidence.
I know. I was feeling rather bad about it, but at the same time was absolutely thrilling. Like, like I could never imagine doing this anywhere else. And yeah, so that was like another important step, sorting out the metal, finding the metal we could use, um, paying the boys. And then the next step was building the fire. And there were no proper houses for this, so they just gathered as much. They had one space that they used, and there was just like this roaring fire in this mud house with a thatched roof. It was just like the scariest thing ever. I thought, Jesus, we are not going into this. They're like, no, you can't go in there. You can go in for a little bit. You can go in for a little bit and see how we do it. Now, it was insane. So him and his brothers, the whole family, they've been doing this for generations. And anyway, they're in this giant fire that they're creating. They're wearing flip-flops, and they've got henna in their hair because it's going to be the optimum condition to like keep the henna because it's really hot. So they've got like this henna dripping down their foreheads while they're carrying these heavy tongs trying to like put the pot in the hottest element of the fire. And it was just incredible. It was like, my God, I will never ever see anything like this again in my life. And so we got to watch them pour the metal, and they did it absolutely perfectly. There were no air bubbles in the cast when we finally broke them, and it was really a lifetime experience. So uh, uh, the metals were poured. I'm not going to say bronze because it probably wasn't. It's just like doorknobs and all hinges. And everything was poured into our one-time cast. We thought, wow, we're there. We're finally going to get our masterpiece and see what's come out. Now, we're just totally excited. This whole process has been thrilling. The giant fire, the henna dripping, and the pouring of the metals, and suddenly there they go. And they just start hammering it, and they just with a huge metal a mallet. They're hammering the clay off and hosing it down with water at the same time. And out comes like the most hideous thing I've ever seen, because you've made this figurine with all these channels, because you have to make the channels on the figurine so that the metal can pour into the form. And so out comes this figurine with all of these awful thick metal channels or canals. What would you call it in English? Like a limb.
Yeah,
and,
strings of metal.
Yeah, limbs of metal, and it's like, and we're just like, oh God, what next? So here we'd been working for several weeks already, maybe 5 weeks, to get all of our statues to this stage, and what we didn't realize is that, well, there's another 7 weeks of like sawing off the metal, filing it down, and we were using the most archaic equipment ever. I just had like a hand file and a metal saw, and this was it. So it was pretty much blood, sweat, and tears. And I remember there I was in my little hotel room watching these Indian movies with all the dancing and the singing. And I was just there crying my eyes out, sawing off these metal limbs, thinking, Jesus, this is never, ever going to happen. But by the time it was over, the statues were absolutely beautiful, and we learned a lot. My fingers were the size of my feet. I couldn't close my fingers because I had so many muscles in my fingers. It was insane. They were really ugly, but it was kind of exciting because I'd never seen my hands so big.
Yeah, you'd worked out all the fingers sawing for so many weeks.
So when I was in India and I was up in Himachal Pradesh, I had met this lovely family, these 2 sisters. They were absolutely adorable, and they insisted on having us over for dinner at their home. And so they said, we're going to pick you up at your hotel, and then, bring you back to the house. I'm like, okay, that's fine. And so here we are, we're at the hotel, and we're waiting. We're in my room, and finally I said, well, when are we leaving? And they said, well, as soon as you change out of your nightgown. And I was dying. I said, oh my God, I've been wearing a nightgown for the last 2 weeks. I thought it was a dress. And it was like, it had like long sleeves. It went down to my ankles. And it was, and I couldn't believe it. I thought, oh God, this is just the biggest mistake. They must think I'm a lunatic walking around in my nightgown. So yes, when you buy something at a market, my advice is ask them, are these pants? Is this a dress or is this a nightgown? Is this a shirt or is this, it might not be clear. Totally embarrassing. Oh, God.
But at least you figured it out, so you could change and get ready.
Yeah. Oh, God, but there were so many of these things. And then there were like these little, they put out these little offerings at every like crossing. So, but these offerings they'd have a shaman come in, like shaman out clean out all your bad, what is it called? Like all the bad things that other people wished on you. And they'd sweep it all away and they'd put it into this little bundle. And then you put it out on the street so that the next person that walked by would like trip over it and take it with them. Yeah, it was nuts. It was so nuts. There were so many weird things in these little tiny villages that were just like, so I was terrified that I was, here I was in my nightgown, jumping over these cursed little boxes.
That would be terrible to just like kick over these boxes and all the locals are like, what is she doing in her nightgown, taking all our bad juju?
And they were probably thinking, oh, let that crazy foreigner in her nightgown take away our bad juju. Good thing they're here.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Now, but India's magic. You could, in these old villages, you would watch, like, women, or men, they would, like, follow the cows. And as soon as the cows, like, took a big dump, they'd, like, wrap up that paddy and, like, take it back because it's fuel. And then it would go back to the kitchen. They dry it out. And a lot of the kitchens were on the floor, just like a clay mound. And then they just fire it up and sit there and smoke and prepare chapatis or something. But there were so many great moments. Oh, God. That's the stuff I love.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to, like, not being a tourist. You're actually involved with the locals.
Exactly. And so there was one time I was in this little village outside of Dharamsala, and there was we had rented this small hut. The hut didn't have water or a bathroom. And there were all these other little huts. So everybody just went to the bathroom like behind these rocks. And we got water from just rainwater. And there was just like this little stove. Like, in the stove is a big word. It was just like a clay ledge. It was a clay ledge. And that's where we had to cook. And then on the way, and then to get the food, we had to walk about 15 kilometers through like this monkey infested forest. And it was wonderful. It was, I was so scared of monkeys. They're big. They're really, really big.
Did you ever get attacked by one?
No,
Kind
no, I didn't get attacked by a monkey. No, but I try and stay away from them. They're cute, but I do stay away.
You respect them.
Yes, and not interfere too much with their lifestyle. But so that's travel for me. Just give me a little ledge and call it a kitchen.
Yeah, there you go.
And then the hotel we were staying in, they had a cleaning service. And then this woman would come in and she'd start with the toilet. Okay, so the toilet's just like this, it's not a toilet. It's what do you call them? They've got like the little treads.
Like
and
a squat pot?
It's a squat pot. So it's a squat pot. So she'd start with a squat pot because that's where the water's coming from. Flush the toilet, wash it out, then take the wicker broom and wash the rest of the floors. Then they would flip the cushion over and spray it with kerosene against bed bugs. And I remember after that, I just thought, if I live till I'm 40, I will be lucky. Because it was so wildly different.
It's so different to how you grew up and what you're used to.
Yeah.
It's like
restaurants, like women do not go to restaurants. Restaurants are not made for women. which means there's no bathroom for a woman, which means there's only a urinal. Yes, like you can imagine how I felt when that happened.
Thanks for an interesting
I
experience.
know. Like, and one of I remember one bathroom had like this urinal, but it was like this tiny little, it was like a hole about the size of a tennis ball. And it was in the corner about 15 centimeters away from the wall. And I was just like, there's no way I'm going to do this. I'm not going to be able to do this. So yeah, luckily things have changed. This is India 20 years ago. This is India today is a very different place.
Yeah.
And these were in very small villages. When I was in Delhi, it was totally different. It
Mm.
was, there were like Bose stores and salespeople like giving like full presentations, and you just walked into a totally different. I think it was called Connaught's Place, something like that, and you were in this other world. You were suddenly in. It could be anywhere. You could be in New York City, and yeah, it was
Mm.
so strange.
Yeah. Just kind of the stark difference.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when I was in Calcutta, that was also when you still had rickshaws. They still had rickshaw drivers they were running the rickshaws. They weren't bicycling them,
Mm.
and that was just that was really tough. That that kind of brought back scenes from like the Romans, and like wow, time stood still somewhere, and but again, that was a while back, so I'm sure that these practices are probably no longer.
Maybe. Maybe not. Yeah. No, that's crazy though. And just to be those people having to live in that environment and drive or run with a rickshaw for a living, you know?
Yes. Yes. And they sleep in their rickshaws too. So they run with it and it's
Mm.
their home. So they sleep there too. And they're usually far away from their families. So it's, really very, very, very poor people living in tough conditions. And I did a lot of drawing of a lot of people on the streets. And I have did a series that I did of just Indian street kids. Um, it's it's really something that stays with you. These impressions, you don't quite lose them. They're always there. That seeing how hard life can be is is a good reason to try and make things better. I think. Really, it was tough. I saw really things that made me not like myself either. One time I was at a train station, and there was this man that came up to me, and he was begging, and he had some very horrific disease on his skin disease, and I had never seen anything like that. And I remember just being paralyzed, and because everything was this was new for me, and I was young, and I saw this person, and I was just immobilized, and I cried for days after, thinking how horrible I was not to be able to give this man some help because I was just startled.
Hmm.
And I think those are the tough things that you take back. And yeah, I think it's a human thing, but it's good to look at it and say, yeah, yeah. Obviously, I didn't have very much exposure.
Yeah.
Mm.
Those can be tough, but they're so important to
Mm.
kind of grow yourself, like you said,
Yes,
with compassion.
indeed. But I would do it all over again any day, even dysentery.
Yeah.
But a year was long enough, after I got dysentery, they gave me such a tough horse shot, like of every kind of what would you call it, antibiotic possible,
Mhm.
that um, I didn't shit for like 10 days. I really thought, oh my God, I'm gonna die. I'm really gonna die. I thought I was gonna die before because dysentery is basically at one point you're just shitting water.
Yeah, you're turning yourself inside out
Yeah, you're
almost.
turning yourself inside out. It was horrible. It was just horrible. We went to a village that had one bathroom in the village. Like if you thought there was only no toilets for women, but there was one bathroom in the village. And people were waiting. And I was just like, I can't do this. I was like, I just can't do this. I can't do this. Why can't I just go outside? And that's what I realized. That's when I learned that, when all the women got off the bus, that's why they were wearing skirts, but they were just huddled around and they were just peeing. And then the movie theater. I went to the first movie where people kissed. And it was called Kuch Kuch Hota Hai. Yeah. It was called Kuch Kuch Hota Hai. And then at the movie theater, I was the only woman, and all the line was like streaming out. It was like this serpentine of a line, and all the men are holding each other's hands in the line, so no one will cut. It was so cute.
That's hilarious.
And so I saw the first movie the first movie that was a movie that was open to the public with the first French kiss in India.
Wow, that's incredible. Which kind of segues into you're also an artist. When did you first start getting interested in art?
Oh my goodness! I think I've always been interested in art. My mom, she's a designer, and when I was a kid, she would always show me her illustrations of like fashion illustrations, and I was enamored, and I thought, wow, she's amazing. I one day I hope I can do this. And my dad was a painter as well. He was quite proficient, and but it was a more of a hobby. But he was an excellent painter, and I think that yeah, it was just something that was always around. We didn't have much like when I was growing up. There was a time when my family was doing quite well, but that ended when I was about 5 or 6, and then we were just like in ruins. I would say in ruins, but the family was like my mom was supporting 2 kids, a husband on her salary at a department store, and so it didn't leave much for any extras. So I think we just got creative, and my mom saved everything, so we had all these things to play with. For her it was probably a hard thing because she had to save all this stuff, and it was like, oh no, like wouldn't it be nice to have it new? But here I would find like this giant box of like 1,000 buttons uh, from endless pieces of clothes. And it's like, wow, I can do something with this, or yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, now with the workshops you do, you kind of fuel that creativity. Um, yeah, tell me a little bit about the workshops that you do here.
Okay, so I've been developing a workshop that I absolutely love for over the past, I'd say, 10 years. It's been a process of figuring out what works best in getting groups of people to connect with their imagination and to find that sweet spot where they feel really good exploring creatively. And I think that's something we all have. And whether it's with music or drawing or painting, we need that. It gives us a huge sense of joy. And this is what I'm trying to recreate in my workshops, is that people feel very well when they start out, and throughout the whole workshop. But there are all kinds of stages throughout the workshop that will limit their senses to help them perceive, um, uh, and create in an environment that feels very safe, and at the same time where they feel like they're in their own world entirely. Um, I do that through different methods. One method is we will begin painting with uh, blindfolds, and this helps people um, really get into their own space and not be concerned about what someone else is doing. And because people come in groups oftentimes, whether it be with families or clubs or offices, it really helps them stay in their own world and connect to the material. I stimulate that environment with sounds. It can be music, but it can be other sounds. I kind of choreograph that as I go, depending on how the group is responding. And if they respond to something in particular, then I will try and play more of that to help them have that time of sort of sheer bliss and discovery. I've done this in Switzerland for groups with Google Zurich, the GSI Foundation. I think it's called the Winterthur Psychiatrische Inrichting or something like this. It's like it was a group of engineers that work for this institution. And schools, plenty of schools. I've also worked with the Chain Foundation. They brought their Erasmus teachers here to Borgarnes for a workshop. I've worked with the city of Djúpivogur and teens in creating large abstract pieces based on the same method.
The same principles.
Yeah, the same principles, the same methods. It was more challenging with teens because what I'm really trying to do with teens, which is very different from adults, is that with teens, I want them to know that there is this space that they can go wild in, but it has to be within this framework. And that's really tough for them because to learn when it's all right. So they get really excited with the music, the letting go, and then to realize, okay, it's in this framework, and after that, it's over. And it's such a good exercise because you go in a kind of there's a routine, so they have many chances of doing it over and over and over again, where they can get it right, and they can get this feeling of I can go wild, and here, okay, now I'm back in my space. I'm back in a space, a shared space, where I have to think about other people in a different way. And so there's a little bit of a different methodology with teens. But with grown-ups, it's adults, a lot of it is really creating environment through as many sensorial interventions as possible. And this seems to really work. And people people are, even when they're reluctant in the beginning, because some people really just don't want to do that thing because they have a bad memory connected to it, or it makes them uncomfortable to do it in front of others. Well, suddenly everybody's blindfolded, and they're not as uncomfortable because they feel like, well, no one can really see me now. And that's actually really nice. It's helpful. So if you're uninhibited, that's when you have joy, right? The moment you're inhibited, it's really tough to do anything with passion or intention because you're just blocking yourself.
Yeah. I'm curious how you see this correlate back to travel. As far as like your workshops, you kind of put them in an environment where they don't have those social pressures. Travel is very similar. You can get out of your normal bubble. You don't have your family pressures. You don't have your friend pressures. You don't have your work. How have you seen travel and art kind of correlate in this regard?
Yeah. Well, I think that when you can escape, escape's maybe not even the right word, but when you can deliberately go to this beautiful place in your mind when you want, you are traveling in this sense. And you get to go somewhere and create a world that any way you want. And so that could be a kind of travel, kind of like imagination travel in this sense. Um, and I think that, yeah, perhaps some of the things you look for in real travel, you can find in creativity, clearly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, earlier last year, you went on an incredible adventure here in Iceland. Um, yeah, tell me more about that trip.
Oh, that was amazing. That was during, it was right after the lockdown. So then the lockdown was lifted and everybody could travel. And I think it was in September.
Mm.
And it was then that they locked down again, and we couldn't travel, and suddenly there was this fantastic sale, this offer, a tilboð in Icelandic, and normally I would not be able to afford this kind of a trip, and I've always loved sailing, and it had been a very long time, a decade since I've been sailing, and I really felt like this would be the opportunity to, yeah, uh, be brave again and do something that made me extremely uncomfortable. And that was super thrilling and absolutely terrifying. And it's one thing to sail in California or sail in a place where the water is really nice, but sailing in Iceland is quite daunting because the water is super rough, and the masses of water are so big, the chances of you being found are very small. And I've done plenty of man overboard exercises when I was a teenager, and I know, like, you hit that body like 20 times before you actually get it onto the boat. So yeah, so I thought, those are the things that scare me at night. But anyway, yeah, a friend of mine, he said, yes, Michelle, you have got to do this. And he dragged 5 other friends on board, and it was extraordinary. It was so good for my soul to be out on the water. It was it was such a different perspective of traveling. It was a time when nobody could travel, and we were traveling. We were on the water, and we were heading to Hornstrandir, and we felt like, wow, we are actually traveling. This is amazing. We're on a boat, and we're going from one place to another without boarding a plane. This is extraordinary. So yeah, that whole adventure was wild. So we left Olafsvik, and we went with a company called Go West Sailing. We left Olafsvik. There were few of us, fewer than they wanted because of this lockdown, but that gave us a little extra room on the boat. Um,
Tell me about the boat. What kind of boat was this?
it looked like it's either a cutter or a sloop. It's a single mast.
Okay.
It's built for Arctic regions. It's a steel enforced hull, which means that it should be able to take a little brunt from a glacier kick. So, or other way around, a boat kick to a glacier.
Yeah.
So so it was designed for Arctic waters, which is that gives one a little bit of peace of mind. Um, Me and my friend Friedrich, we were on the first duty. So everybody takes turns. There were two of us sailing the boat. So we sailed from Olasvik all the way to Latrabjar. And that was extraordinary. That was at night. I think we left port at maybe 9 or 10, and our shift was over at 12 or 1. The sun was absolutely glorious, golden light. There were pods of pilot whales just dancing along the boat. It was pure magic. The the wind was, the wind was like fierce. It was cold. I did everything I could for 3 hours straight not to puke everywhere. um, Being seasick is just part of the fun, and everybody was wearing patches. Even the skipper and the engineer, everybody gets seasick. So it was exciting. We sailed at night. We learned how to navigate. We learned how to operate, some basic equipment. It was quite challenging cooking on the boat. I managed to do a pineapple upside down cake. So the water was not rough. We had pretty windless days after the first day, that can be the most disappointing thing, is if you have no wind. But once we get up north, when I go on my next trip, which will be on July 14th, I'm heading to Greenland.
Oh, fun.
Yes. So this is we go straight from Olasvik directly to near, I think it's called Kulusuk, and to this area, and John Pearson's harbor. And that is a longer, very, very cold journey, crossing the Denmark Strait. And so I've been preparing for that, but I'm pretty excited about it. We've got a crew of 10, an engineer, a captain, and more. I really can't tell you. I don't know where we'll be. It's very hard to make a plan for the captain to give us a specific plan, because that can change depending on weather. We just know we're going to Greenland.
Is it the same crew in the same boat?
It is the same boat, and part of the crew is the same.
Hmm.
We have a few new crew members, but most of them are friends, and this was something we started planning last year, right after we returned from our last trip, feeling that not having much confidence in borders being open, we thought, well, let's do this. And I'm really glad I did, because now I've only got my first shot of the vaccine, and chances are I might not have my second before we leave. And which means that I have to go straight into Kulusuk first and get my test, and then be quarantined on the boat for 5 days. But which is quite all right.
Yeah, because it's not like anything would change after your crossing. You'll still be on the boat. Well, sounds like an adventure. That sounds incredible.
It is. It's going to be a very different way of traveling. Just being able to cross an ocean without a plane, without without with wind.
Yeah.
Traveling with the wind is thrilling. There's something so magical about being on the water in the ocean and on this tiny little boat in the middle of nowhere. A speck on the ocean.
Insignificant.
That's it. You do feel very insignificant, and that really adds to travel.
Yeah.
I really feel like, the last time I went on a big trip and I boarded this giant jumbo jet, I felt like, wow, we're killing the planet.
Yeah, there's the carbon emissions issue, but then there's also it's like you get on, and then oftentimes you close the window or you aren't able to look out, and then you get off, and just the time goes by and you don't really understand like how far separate you are. Whereas if you take a boat, you just understand like how enormous the Earth is, honestly.
Exactly. And I'm really hoping that once I get enough sailing hours under my knees, that I will feel confident to sail to sail from Iceland to Tenerife. And I think I would prefer that than getting on a plane any day. It's just so much more fun. There's a lot more adventure involved,
Yeah.
and being on the water is it does something to you. It really changes you. You get this quietness inside that's so different. To be quiet together as a small group is very weird. It's a new weird experience. Usually I know groups, like being in groups and traveling, they're not quiet. But once you're on the boat, there's this awesome, yeah, reverence of everything around you, and you can't really do much but just say, there were a lot of tears on the last trip. People had like, wow, these moments of, ooh, that's pretty spectacular. I don't think we're ever going to see anything like that again.
That would be an incredible experience.
It's exciting. I recommend taking a sailing class. When I was in my teens, I got my skipper's license, my skipper's rating. It was just sort of essential. Everybody was sailing. It was a place where there were a lot of boats, and it made sense. But learning some basics is a little helpful, but at the same time, it's not. I don't think it's that hard. It's mostly dealing with your own fears, because the whole time you have to be, you're very conscious of the fact that you have to lock yourself into position anytime you're on deck.
Yeah.
So there's no being on deck without having 2 points locked, especially with so many people on board. And obviously there's no drinking on deck. But it's, yeah, you're aware there's this imminent danger all the time. So even when you're sleeping, you're feeling that rock, you're being tossed back and forth. There's never a moment that you can really let go, because if you do, you'll just like fly out of your berth. There's no shower. Like there's a shower, but but it's the most insane idea, because like you can't shower with a bar of soap and water on a boat that's just like moving back and forth and bouncing all over the place. That's not gonna work.
Yeah. Turns out to be more hassle than it's worth.
Exactly. So yeah, I got this thing. I'm really excited about it. I actually have it right here. What is it? It is called Sea Wilderness Wash. So I'm like, this is the best thing I've ever bought.
What is it? Like
It's like a gel that is like a wash, but you don't need water to take it off. I think it's just got a
it's
lot
like
of,
hand sanitizer for
yeah.
the
It's
whole
like
body.
it's like body hand sanitizer that keeps away mosquitoes.
Nice.
So,
That is awesome. All in one.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I I want to wrap up this conversation with a section I call it's just a travel trivia section.
And now it's time for travel trivia. Travel trivia coming your way.
First, what's your favorite city that you've ever visited?
Oh, that's so hard. Oh god.
Yeah, these really are hard questions, unfortunately.
Okay, I'm just gonna say Georgetown.
And
Um,
Guyana?
no, Georgetown in Malaysia.
Oh.
Yes. Basically because they had all of my favorite Chinese restaurants. So it's filled with it's it's like the Chinatown of Malaysia. And you can just eat your way through Georgetown.
I love it. If you could live anywhere in the world permanently, where would you want to live?
Oh, I think I'm living here.
That's great.
It's Iceland for sure.
What is the worst food you've ever tried? Or the worst food experience you've ever had?
Ooh, that has to be. Oh gosh. It's the what is it called? It's not Svith. Svith was quite okay compared to um Harkalt. Is it called Harkalt? What is it called? Yeah, Harkalt. Am I saying it right? Are you smiling? You know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. The ammonia is really tough. I felt like I was eating a chemistry lab.
And what is it? I'm not familiar with it.
It's shark.
Oh, is this the
Fermented shark.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I just felt like I was eating some sort of yeah,
Science project.
yeah, science project. It didn't go well with me or my clothes for the longest time. So yeah, I have to say that I've eaten a lot of weird things, and that's definitely that tops it. But still, it's my favorite country to live in.
If you could change one thing about travel, this is kind of a generic question. If you could change one thing about travel, what would that be?
That would definitely be more commercial flights that were electric, electric planes.
Kind of reducing the carbon footprint
Yeah, it
of
just makes
travel.
sense. There's ways. If we have electric cars, we can fly with electric planes, and we already are.
Yeah, we're actually making big strides with that. So,
So, so yeah, that this becomes more accessible. That this would be accessible, not just to yeah, the affluent,
hmm,
but that um, regular folks could would make the biggest impact by using them.
yeah. And then a quick this or that section. Do you prefer travel by train or bus?
I would say uh, they both have their ups and downs. I do love the buses in India. There's nothing as joyful as yeah, riding in an old school bus for 48 hours with goats and rice and and dancing people singing and lots of joy and fun. Yeah, yeah, I can't beat that. That's
Do you prefer beaches or city?
um, oh wow. That's not a fair question. I I I I prefer beaches in cities.
Mm, cities on the beach.
Cities on the beach. A city on the beach is my kind of city. Let's see. Are there? Yeah. No, that's not true. But yes, cities on the beach. Valencia is a
Mm,
great example of a city on the beach. Very practical city. Beautiful city to visit. It's easy to bicycle from the beach to the center. Yes,
nice.
beaches and cities.
Do you prefer solo travel or group travel?
I've never really done group travel except for on a boat.
Do you prefer a strict schedule or more go with the flow?
I would never work with a strict schedule. No, I am definitely go with the flow. After being in India for a year, I'm very patient. I'm a very patient person, and I like what happens when you wait. Things happen when you wait.
True. Do you prefer planned tours or random explorations?
I prefer the last minute ticket, not knowing where it's going.
I like it.
Yeah.
And then last question, what makes travel worth it to you personally?
I think it makes me more human. I think it makes me a more compassionate person. I think that living in your own world can really close your mind and make it hard to have empathy for other people if you don't actually see the way they live and feel the way they live and understand what makes them do what they do. There's no such thing as a bad travel, because all those intense experiences, they make travel special, and that's the contrast that makes living interesting.
Thank you for being a part of today's conversation. If you haven't already, subscribe to this podcast and come find us on social media at Travel Worth Living. This episode was edited and produced by Agnes Gretosdottir, with music by Vlad Glushenko. I'm your host, Seth Sutherland, and this is Travel Worth Living.